Welcome back to Talking in Stations Midweek Update. My name is Artimus Albosa, and it is currently December 6th or December 7th, depending on where you are in the world. Joining me today, I have Silver Suspiria.
Hey, Twitch, you can hear me now.
We are good to go. And also today on the show, a special guest, Tek Stalker.
Good evening, fellow internet nerds.
It's going to be a busy show today because we've got quite a bit of news going on. Most of that is because we've got an update coming next Tuesday. It's the December update, and we'll tell you some of the details on. So, first things first, getting into things, we've got changes coming to the overview, which is something you're going to have to personally make changes to. And if you make your own overview, or if you use packs set by other people, don't worry. It'll be sorted for you. Just make sure you use an update and respond to the mailing list. But what is happening is coming in the December patch, there's going to be a change. There's going to be a new category added underneath the Celestials category. And it's basically going to be only where Sinos go. So you can now, instead of having Sinos be with other beacons, so if you're like in faction warfare or other things like that, and you want to see Sinos but not random plexes and things like that, you can now do that with your overview. The downside is, by making this change, if people aren't paying attention, don't update their overview come February, when the actual change goes live and Sinos do move from one category to the other, you won't see Sinos on your overview anymore, and that could be problematic. So make sure you keep an eye out for this. If you make your own overview, you're going to want to change it. The new category is going to be called Future Home of Sino Fields. You can find it underneath Celestials in the overview browser. So keep an eye out for that.
Like a good couple days for Genghis.
No kidding. Other changes coming into the December release, as has been talked about widely, we've got updates to the War Deck changes. You can check out the dev blog for that. It'll be linked in the show notes on talkinginstations.com. An interesting change that was discussed, but details have only is that there's a new option for corporations to set themselves to reject structure trans. This will be an option which I believe CEOs and directors can enact. It can be seen just on the corporation info, show info window, also in your attributes, and you can change it to accept or reject structures. This is because under the new system, corporations can only declare or be declared war upon if they have any upwell structure, any starbase, any POCO, or any sovereignty structure, including iHubs and TCUs in space. So keep an eye out for that. If you don't want to be War Deck, make sure you take any of those structures down and set this to reject structure transfers if you don't want to get transferred to random Raitaru so that you can be War Deck.
I mean, that's an interesting change, Artemis. I always thought that should be a thing you would have to accept, right? If somebody transfers a structure, you would think that a CEO or director would have to accept that. I never understood why you could just throw a structure at a corporation randomly like that.
I don't know. Maybe it's a technical side of things that it's sort of, well, because you can do it with duels, can't you? And you can do it with convos and fleet invites and everything. Yeah, I guess it is a bit weird, isn't
it? Yeah.
I'm thankful for the change. I get tired of goons spamming me with Keepstar trades. You can only hit no so many times.
Yes. The War Deck changes, Artemis, are interesting too. I like it. I think maybe it takes the ability to grief people down a notch, and I think it just adds a way for organizations to opt out of being War Decked, though, by putting their structures in an alt corp or some sort of affiliate organization, and then this way they can run their freights more safe or something. Maybe that was the CCP's goal anyway.
Yeah, but if you have the alt corp holding the structure, that alt corp can be war decked and the structure can be killed by the various entities that do that. So nothing is completely safe, which is a good thing. Also in the news, we've got changes coming to skill injectors. This is a big one. So there is on CC a new augmenter, a new drug, if you will, very much like the, what are they called? The things that bump your attributes like a ton for a limited period of time. Anybody remember? Skill accelerators. There we go. It's similar to an accelerator, but the effects of this one is it allows you to use a certain number of skill injectors without receiving diminishing returns due to the amount of skill points you have. So currently in the game, if you have like more than 5 billion SP, anytime you use a skill injector, you're not going to be getting the 500,000 skill points out of it that you would if you had less than 5 million SP. This gets worse and worse the more SP you have, to the point where if you have more than 80 million skill points, you're only injecting and getting 150,000 skill points out of that. So these new augmenters are going to be incredibly valuable. They provide some incentive to not just inject everything day one and have day one Titan and Rorqual pilots for the super rich people. It's still possible, but there's incentive not to. I am personally excited for this because, like with new ships coming out, the Triglavian ships, the weapon systems, or even if I'm running like a tight fitting on something and I suddenly realize, oh, I need the missile launcher rigging skill to level 4. It sucks only getting 150,000 SP out of these injectors. How about you guys? What do you think?
I don't really like the change. I enjoy all the Rorqual and Titan pilots that inject on day one. You have the ship and the skill, but you don't know how to fly it. So please don't let this change go forward.
Well, it is still possible. They're just incentivized not to.
And I feel that CCP is personally against high skill point players because they're giving all these perks to new players to the game. But I'm just saying, we've been with you a long time. Throw the dog a bone. Some guys been playing for a decade. It'd be nice to get a little CCP love.
Well, that's exactly what this change is. So this allows the players who have been playing the game for a long time and who have high SP numbers to inject with skill injectors and not receive penalties based on the amount of time they've played and the amount of SP they've accrued. One comment I have to say is that obviously this is on CC. There has been no official CCP announcement, so it could come, it could not be here, it could be this was just for Singularity type thing. But currently the numbers are you can inject 3 injectors with this thing, and the accelerator lasts for 666.666 days. So hopefully both of those numbers are temporary. I'd like to see this thing last maybe a month, 2 months, something like that, so that you can use a bit more than 3 injectors without diminishing returns over time, but there is still that incentive, and high skill players can't like reach the maximum 300 some million SP overnight with this sort of thing. But good change in my opinion. I'm looking forward to.
Yeah, I mean, Tek as a leader, FC. Don't you think it would be cool? You guys could be in the shacks tomorrow. Up in the meta.
I'm personally still waiting on shield slaves. I mean, and
make shields great again.
You know, I get it. I understand the changes that they're trying to make because until recently, new pilots didn't really have a chance to compete with guys that have been playing for years. So I get what they're trying to do. They're trying to get new blood into the game and make it fun for them. And that's great. There's got to be some way to balance it without making the old guys a little more bitter than they already are. So yeah, it's fine. Give us a little love and it'll go a long way. And I think CCP also knows that guys have been playing for a long time. They're not going anywhere anyway, or they would already left.
Well, one player who has been coming and going quite often has been Elo Knight, and his group Black Legion ... at least the most recent iteration of it, has redeployed from Geminate down to Delve recently. Based on kill boards and various rumors around the cluster, it appears that their initial goals are just whaling and general salt farming, or rather tier farming in order to harvest the salt from it. And it's going to be interesting to see what happens. We'll see what sort of impact they can have in Delve with the super umbrella that is there. We've seen that they've been flying what I really like, which is like cloaky ham newt legions. Fantastic doctrine. I really enjoy it, just the concept of it. Not sure on the efficacy. They have lost a few, but then again, they've also had some limited success rather. I'm interested to see how this is going to affect the content generator that has been Geminate over the last few weeks to months. It appears that since Black Legion has left, it's sort of had a calming effect. We haven't had many big fights that have been happening, as we saw recently with the fights in BWF and in Ojainen. But we have seen the typical sort of skirmishy things that you see with the Goonswarm Sigs out there, with Horde Space being Horde Space, always up for giving a fight. So there's still content to be had, but not the big fleet fights we've been seeing as of late. In other news around the Null block, we've got Triumvirate, who has lost 3 sizable corps and continues to bleed Sov to Skill Yourself and Scourge Dot. The 3 corps that they most recently lost in, we have Sanctuary of Shadows, who left first. They have not joined an alliance since. They also lost Malleus. I'm not even going to try and pronounce that. That went to Northern Coalition Dot. And then they lost Lethal Injection Inc. to Pandemic Legion. This happened over the last month or so, and each of these corps is around 140 to 150 members at the time of leaving. So that's a sizable chunk of players who are no longer in Tri. And indeed, we're seeing that their Sov is being hit as a result. Over in Scalding Pass, their holdings are being taken by Scourge Dot, a well-known medium-sized Russian group who are known for punching above their weight, especially in these sort of fights. Also, their sovereignty in Innsmother is being hit, this time by Skill Yourself. Notably, Skill Yourself first took out their iHub and TCU in the Keepstar staging system of CTAC-J, and since then they've just sort of been picking off around the edges, taking Sov where they can. So we'll keep an eye on this. No real fighting has been happening, at least of any significant scale, but keep your eye on it. We'll see what happens with Tri. They've been down and out before and made a comeback, so we'll see if that can happen again. In other news, we've got fighting also happening in the south, this time between Fraternity and Winter Coalition, and Bright Side of Death and their allies. Fighting has mostly been happening in and around Curse. This is the sort of ancestral home of B-Sod, and the fighting has been happening reportedly because of some AWOXing that was happening. So the story goes that B-Sod used to be allies, used to have a blue status with Fraternity and Winter Coalition, but they were abusing that and AWOXing with some allies, and so that was the blue status was dropped, and it was decided that they're just going to be bulldozed in order to kick them out of the region, punish them for their transgressions, and hopefully maybe gain some new renter space in Scalding Pass. The most recent iteration or spike in the flame that we've had from this particular thing was a 160 billion ISK. We saw this over the staging Fortizar in Curse from Bright Side of Death. It was quite a big battle, 160 billion ISK lost. The winning side was Fraternity. And we saw a lot of the standard shield Macarials getting killed by carriers. It was an interesting fight. The groups involved here, we've got Winter Coalition, and they're allying with Scourge Dot, who they've been, I guess, Blue Troll with for a while now. And then on the other side, we've got Bright Side of Death and the Right Order. So some interesting groups. Hostilities are reportedly calming down after the loss of the staging Keepstar. Supposedly, there is some negotiating happening right now. We'll see how it turns out. Any news from Los?
From what I'm told, blue is just a color. So, AWOXing, don't take it personally.
Silver, you got any news from Losec Faction Warfare area for us today?
Yeah. So today about the bots being banned in Faction Warfare. Read the post. A lot of people are excited that maybe Faction Warfare, CCP could change. I just think that like other things that are botted, right? You have to have a ship in a particular location for a period of time while you do a relatively simple task, and you warp off when danger comes. So it's a very bottable activity, just like anything else. So it's just a continuation in my mind against CCP's ongoing bot faction warfare. I'm not huge issue. It's unfair to those who don't bot, maybe. It did have some impact on Warzone control, especially in the Minmatar or Mar Warzone, where it's smaller and easier to push the Warzone over in one side. So the botters have a greater effect there, because if the PvPers push one side and then at night, let's say, 20 bots get on, they can easily erase all of that work. So it's easier to game that side, and that's where it was most prevalent. I'm happy to see any action against botters, but I'm not sure it's enough to faction warfare. I don't know what you think, Tek.
Well, I mean, faction warfare botting is a thing. It's something that's gone on for years. There's actually individuals and groups that specialize in it. It's a very system to manipulate. You roll out all, go run them all. It's relatively safe, minus, people that are harassing your gate camps, and you can make a ton of LP. And let's face it, it all is converted into to the good people at Pandemic Horde. Keep up those routing efforts, VNI. Yeah, thing, but I don't know if this stops. Maybe it stems it a little bit, but people who want to bot are going to bot, and it's going to be hard to stop.
We had Marauders leaving Gal Mill, another major storied. I haven't spoken to.
So really quickly,
were-
I apologize for interrupting you here, Silver, but it appears that we're having some trouble with the stream. It appears Discord's connection to my computer is not particularly solid at the moment, and so those watching live on Twitch are not getting very much audio from my guest and my co-host. Fortunately, we are using a new feature to record the audio, so it should all be going to Craig, as you can see him talking right now. And so it should be fixed for people who listen to the recording after the show goes live. But as far as sorting it live right now, I'm not sure there's much we can do, but we'll continue on as normal and hope that the problem fixes itself.
Okay. Sounds good. Black Fox Marauders left. I think today there were rumors that they were heading your. That.
Oh boy, way to put me on the. I look at this point. Faction warfare in general is in a pretty bad state. I don't think it's coming back. I know every group outside of just a few long time diehard groups is basically bailing out of it. So I don't know if they're heading our group. I think they're just basically getting out and testing the waters a little bit, because there's not much going on in faction warfare at this point.
Yeah, agreed. And Tek, your group and my group, both in the same position over the last at least year of out there, and we're both in null now, trying to find where that content is, since it's not in LoSec right now, at least not in the U.S. time zone where most of the Black Fox guys are playing.
Well, over a year ago, faction warfare probably really started its death spiral. Content and LoSec started to dry up a little bit. Our in-game faction warfare opponent, Galmel, kind of tossed in the towel. So collectively as a group, the Galmel guys decided to go out to nullsec and try to learn the mechanics and see what we can do. And hey, guess what? With a little bit of effort or no effort at all, you can end up with SOV. So here we are 12 months later, and we're still sitting in Cloud Ring with SOV. So
yeah, which kind of leads us to our current state of affairs, right? We have, for the past year, our core gameplay starting to dry up. Both groups started to grow in an S, all splitting off, looking for, and we wind not in faction warfare together anymore. So the game mechanic doesn't force us to be blue. We're U.S. time zone based mostly. We live directly next to each other in Cloud Ring. So sparks started to fly a little bit, which leads us to the current events of we lost our fleet, which was a bit of an emotional loss for FedUp. It was our first fort we purchased way back when we couldn't really even afford had some sentimental value. But to be honest, we've been even for a long time, for several months now, focusing on nullsec. So there wasn't really assets wise. The fight over it was fun. It's been generally good content. We didn't really stage caps or anything for it. We went in with a subcap fight. The forces of RDRAW here and a little bit of U.S. time zone stuff. Don't confuse that with greater snuff, because a lot of people make that mistake. There's a U.S. time zone snuff corp that often. That doesn't mean that snuff is dropping a hammer fight. It's been mostly, my group and Tek's group with a few allies. I will say it's traditional RF, but most. What do you think, Tek?
Good fights. We were blue for a long time, and things where you got your towel in with in low to our blue, kind of live close to each other out in null, have a little fun. Real has been abandoned for a long time, and if anything, probably significant out of it.
Yeah, totally agree. Into basically, with RDRAW, we Armada and free range chickens, and RDRAW on the other side. I mean, you have tissue now. What's the deal with tissue, Tek?
I couldn't tell you. I think they're now in low sec. They may be doing some things with snuff, but I mean that's one of the things. Dan is we get a lot of the well, you guys are blue to snuff and you're evil. And yes, I guess we are evil, but I mean we're entirely two separate groups. We get to. But I mean, pretty much the snuff guys do snuff things and we do our things, and every now and again we get together and have a party. So, I mean, I don't have any insight into what they're exactly doing. I think Tissue has been in some fleets with them. I don't know if that's a trial or whatever. I'm just not going to spill the beans on it if it was. So, because it's not my place to talk about.
But they were with you on the Fleet attack.
Well, I mean, sure, but I could say you were with Goons because they were with you in the Fleet fight as well.
Yeah. So there was a small group of Goons that came down in hurricanes to, shoot things. So I think it's mostly been good, Tek. I mean, to the point, what's the goal? So I would consider you guys the aggressor in the nullsec campaign. Do you agree with that or no?
I don't know. Sure, something. Every story needs a bad guy, so we're the bad guys. We'll play that road. I mean,
you're my hero.
It's just one of those things. I don't. Everybody in Eve is so worried about that spin, putting that on it, and at this point, my group, we just can't really be stuff's. If Eve. And the end result for us is hopefully to get some people not really interested in looking for those super tie-dye. Really no fun. I've been in a lot of them, and I know the mechanic and why it's there, but it's still just not very fun to participate in. So, I guess these are small to mid-size fleet skirmishes that are fun at this point. I think both groups are enjoying themselves, and, we're kind of in it to win it. My group is a super hyper active and also autistic to an extreme level. So we're going to jump in there and have some fun, I think.
Your goal for your fights, it's every, I don't know, 30 on 30, or not much bigger than that. We had a nice cat brawl in Udi a couple nights ago. So I think the content has been good, especially since not just in LoSec, but in LoSec in general. The U.S. content, at least for us post-war in the North, have been hard to find because we're living in an area that's been completely burned out, right? I mean, there's nothing in Pureblind and Fade for the most part for us to fight. So this is sort of convenient, right?
It's not grade A Sov. I mean, the farming is not great. There's a lot of things that aren't attractive about that area. So, yeah, I mean, the bigger nullsec blocks kind of stay away from it, or they're not interested in it. I guess financially is probably not really worth their time. And I think that's probably the reason why our groups are out there. But we'll have a good time fighting for it and see what happens. I don't think my group has anything invested in Null that we're not willing to lose. So, I mean, we're just going to have fun and fight it out and see what happens.
So not a war.
Well, I mean, you can label it a war if you want to. I mean, it's fine with me. We can call it a war, and we'll be the bad guys. You be the good guys, and we're going to have fun along the way. The whole goal for us is content. I mean, so hopefully we're going to have some fun fights. So far, the fights have been fun. I think I've seen both groups kind of step up a little bit, and there's a lot of metaing going back and forth with who can one-up different action throughout the time zone. So I don't think that there's anything but positive to take away from it thus.
Yeah, I totally agree.
And I think also, we're kind of the group that's been around a little bit longer, and you guys are kind of like the newer group on the block. So it's kind of a little bit of the old bitter veterans versus the young and the energetic group. And I think numbers are kind of good on both sides. So it's been a good time. I don't have any complaints.
I have a bit of
it's been good.
Strange question as regarding how this particular war relates to faction warfare. And that is, like, for your group, and certainly for Panda's out before you left faction warfare, your income was more tied to sovereignty than faction warfare, as I understand it, right, Silver?
I think in general it shifted that direction, probably more so now. Yeah.
So my question is, because your opposition in CalMill has died out, why aren't we seeing the manipulation of the tier system and who owns what part of the battlefield that we see in the smaller Galente Amar region, in the the Amar Mimitar region that we're not seeing in Galente and Caldari? Like, why is that manipulation not happening, even though you sort of have nobody to oppose that manipulation if you wanted to do it?
I think that's a good question. I think a little bit of it does happen. I think that way, so it's a little bit harder to do that. For my group in particular, I'm not sure about Tech, we're just busy doing other things. We're making, a pretty good income in Null now, and we've been focused there. And so we don't have any equipment to do such a thing in LoSec anymore. I don't know. I think just our interests have shifted a little bit, for my group at least.
And I get that. LoSec is kind of stagnant a little bit right now, and I don't think either war zone, as far as faction warfare, is functioning. It's kind of being farmed back and forth a little bit. I just don't think there's enough interest in it. And also, both war zones have pretty sizable pirate faction corps that kind of ride roughshod over it. So it's hard to get a lot of traction in either war zone without a pirate entity kind of dropping the hammer on.
Yeah, that's a good point. Both areas in LoSec now are pretty heavily controlled by bigger entities. What we call pirates, Artimus, or just larger groups that are not faction warfare people.
Pirates.
Yeah, Tech's a pirate now.
I am a pirate. But we're coming together.
that booty in it.
Yeah, exactly.
So, Tek, a question for me. Third party speaking. If you do wind up, claiming the rest of Cloud Ring, there, do you plan to do anything with it, or what?
Yes, our immediate plans will be to sell it back to you at double the ISK, because we are truly Eve's only online ISK doublers. So everybody who's listening, nullsec constellations will be for sale shortly. Go ahead and contact me for negotiation of in-game. No, I don't know. It just it's believe it or not, from my perspective, I think SOB mechanics at this time closely resemble faction warfare mechanics. So I can kind of see how groups who were stronger groups in faction warfare have kind of latched on and are making good use of the current SOB mechanics, because, Entosis is a lot like running plexes in faction warfare, even though I'd have to say to some aspect even a little more ridiculous. CCP, if you're listening, Entosis Griffins, really? So it's something that I think we understand. There's not a lot of difference. It's a little bit of time investment running an Entosis link, and if one of the two groups cares toasted, then there's going to be some conflict over it. So it's just kind of a way to get some content going and just start picking at each other. And I think that's happening equally on both sides.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that's right. Just two fleets come together at some point, right?
Well, let's talk about when those fleet fights happen, because it's been a large complaint in the past, and even when Aegis Saw was being introduced, that these new mechanics would sort of prevent large-scale fights from happening. And when Citadels came out, the same argument was made. When you guys are fighting, right, when a pitched battle actually happens, is it happening over SOV? Is it happening over staging Citadels? Is it happening just because two roaming gangs happen to clash together? Like, what do fights actually look like, and what causes them in your little war, not a war?
Well, I think unlike the major nulls that fight each other, when they kind of go after each other, it seems to be like a total scorched earth campaign. They're just looking to burn each other's stuff down wholesale. For smaller to mid-sized groups, I think it has to do with, nullsec income, and then also to try to neuter their logistics a little bit. Like all the SOB fights are constellation based, so they're going to happen in pockets if you're Entosising, and it kind of comes down to how fast you can reship or supply your guys to get them out on grid. And then also, I think earlier today, our two groups had a little skirmish where it was pretty equal numbers, but sure, we have guys that are in Tosisine, and some of them are alts, but there was two fleets formed on either side, and we came together and had a good little scrap, and the group that won that scrap ended up finishing up the Entosis timers, so they were able to, in this case, we were able to defend. But so I mean, it's a combination. We poked at each other's citadels, and that's kind of been fun, and that's going to be, I mean, that'll end up in some big fights, because nobody wants to lose those assets, because they are important, especially when it comes to getting ships and supplies out to nullsec and staged. Unless you're producing everything, then you're jump raidering that stuff.
Yeah, and I think the other point is, for a smaller group like us, right? And maybe a small percentage of those are actually upgraded for ratting or mining, right? So you go after those key systems that are heavily upgraded, and that sparks some emotion, right? And a stronger response from the opposition. And then you get the two fleets that sort of form up, and then you're running around trying to catch each other, and then there's a fight on a gate, or there's a fight on one of the nodes. And that's what we're both looking for. And Tek's right. Usually one side wins, and whoever wins that one skirmish usually finishes up whatever timer we were running, and is declared the victor for that day.
And I mean, one of the refreshing things for us is being low sec pirate groups. You know, a lot of fights happen when low sec was really active. One of the key components to the outcomes of those fights is being able to tackle down the enemy fleet. But when you get out to null, you have that mighty bubble that we drop on you, and then one side is not going anywhere. So, I mean, it can lead to a pretty decisive victory side or the other. So, I mean, that's kind of an interesting change. And I've noticed so far in the little conflict that we're having that even some of the other groups in the area are kind of getting involved. In my opinion, mostly stacked against us, but that's okay. We're the boogeyman. We got that. So we'll play the heels. But we're getting fights outside of just Fed Up and Iron Armada and those groups. So we're seeing some other groups kind of getting involved and they're roaming around in their fleet. So, I mean, it's my hope that it can just kind of spiral out of control a little bit and we can have fun on a bigger scale and involve more groups.
All right. Well, I appreciate you coming on Tek today and talking about what life is like for you post faction warfare. Certainly, we're helping each other out in the U.S. time zone. I think that's all we had for today, Artimus. Tek, any shout outs that you have or things, last comments you want to make?
Just a shout out to my Wang brothers and sisters who are currently pooping up your Twitch chat. I told them I had to be good, but they don't have to necessarily be good. But they're a good group of guys. I appreciate all of them, and I have fun gaming with them still to this day. And I think that's what keeps us logging in and out of Eve every night is to thanks, guys. I appreciate it. And we'll see you guys on the battle.
Sounds good, Tek. And for the rest of and that's all we have today for Talking Station's weekly update. We will see you next week.